In the shadow of official history, among pages rarely quoted, lies a text whose very existence challenges our established understanding of the past. This manuscript is known as the Book of Enoch, a forbidden, mysterious, and for many, a frightening document that was once part of the Holy Scriptures but was eventually cast out. Its pages weren't torn from the biblical canon by accident. The reason for its exile is a mystery we will begin to uncover today. This ancient work, written over 2,000 years ago, begins not with a prayer or a blessing, but with a dire warning to all of humanity and to those known as the fallen angels. According to the book, it was they who turned a once pure earth into a home of moral decay, bloodshed, and forbidden sorcery. So, what is this book, and why was its content so inconvenient? Created between 300 and 100 BC, it is a collection of revelations said to have been received by a man named Enoch. In the first centuries of the New Era, as the canons of Judaism and Christianity were being formed, this text was decisively excluded. This decision raises the main question: what secrets revealed in the book forced church leaders to take such a step? It speaks of things that official religion prefers to keep silent about. It provides answers to questions where the Holy Scripture is strangely vague or avoids difficult topics. The paradox is that many early church fathers like Justin Martyr, Clement of Alexandria, and Tertullian treated this book with the greatest respect. Their writings contain numerous references to it, and some even quoted it directly as a sacred text. So, what changed? What information, once considered divine revelation, later became heresy? Perhaps the answer lies in the prophecies themselves. Researchers suggest one reason for its ban was its clear and detailed predictions about the coming of the Messiah, written long before the events of the Gospels. Such knowledge, received directly from heavenly sources, could have challenged the exclusivity of later revelations. It openly speaks of strange beings with advanced technologies who visited our Earth and shared their knowledge, bringing humanity not only progress, but also immense destruction. This book is not just a collection of myths. It's a key to understanding the darkest chapters of our history, where the giants on Earth came from, why the Great Flood became inevitable, and what forces were truly fighting for the souls of the first humans. The stories within are so shocking and contrary to the conventional worldview that it was easier to declare them apocryphal, false, and unworthy scripture. But to truly appreciate the scale of these revelations and understand why they were hidden, we must first meet their author. After all, the credibility of these incredible stories depends directly on the man who wrote them down. His name was Enoch, and he was not just a prophet or a sage. According to ancient texts, he was the keeper of heavenly treasures, the head of archangels, and a servant at the very throne of God. To understand the book, you must understand the man, who, it is said, never knew death, but was taken to heaven alive. This man's name was Enoch. To grasp the depth of his revelations, we must travel back to a time when the world was young, to the dawn of humanity. In the genealogical tree leading from the first man, Adam, Enoch holds a special place as the seventh. In ancient traditions, this number always carried a sacred meaning, signifying completeness and divine perfection. He was the great-grandfather of Noah, the man destined to save life on earth from the waters of the Great Flood. Thus, Enoch stands at the threshold of two eras. He was the last great righteous man of the pre-flood world, whose wisdom was meant to be a warning for future generations. His name itself is a key, translating to initiator, or one who consecrates. Legends credit him with the invention of writing and astrology, fundamental knowledge that separates civilization from chaos. He wasn't just a patriarch, he was a teacher, a prophet, and a sage who sought to guide his people on the path of righteousness. However, his entire biography in the canonical book of Genesis fits into just a few lines, ending with one of the most mysterious phrases in all of Holy Scripture. "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." Think about those words. Of all the other patriarchs of that time who lived for 700, 800, or even 900 years, it simply says, "and he died." But Enoch is the exception. His earthly life, according to the text, lasted 365 years, strikingly short for that era, but symbolically matching the number of days in a solar year, hinting at his deep connection to the heavenly cycles and cosmic order. The phrase "walked with God" signifies not just a righteous life, but a constant, profound spiritual communion, almost a friendship between a mortal man and his Creator. He was so close to the divine source that the boundary between worlds grew thin for him. That is why his departure was unlike any other. The text doesn't say he died. It says he was not, because God took him. This is not a description of death, but a testimony to an incredible event, an ascension. According to ancient interpretations, Enoch was taken into the heavenly kingdom alive, without experiencing physical death. He became the first human to overcome the earthly limit, not through the gates of oblivion, but through direct divine intervention. This event makes his testimony absolutely unique. His book is not just a retelling of others' words or philosophical reflections. It is an eyewitness account from someone who has been where no mortal has ever set foot and returned to leave his knowledge in manuscript form. His words are those of a messenger who saw the structure of the universe, attended the heavenly council, and knew the true reasons for the coming catastrophe. So, what secrets were revealed to this righteous man during his incredible walks with God? The first and most stunning story which opens his forbidden book is not about humans and their sins. It begins in the heavens and tells of a cosmic betrayal by those who were meant to protect humanity, the angels. The revelations shown to Enoch begin not with the sins of man, but with a catastrophe that originated in the heavens themselves. The greatest evil to befall the pre-flood world came not from below, but from above. According to his book, there was a special order of angelic beings known as the Watchers. Their mission was noble. They were assigned to watch over the young human race, to protect and guide it, but never to interfere directly in its development. They were the guardians of the divine plan, witnesses to the flourishing of life on earth. But long observation gave birth to temptation. Watching the daughters of men, their beauty and vitality, the Watchers began to experience feelings alien to their spiritual nature. A forbidden desire was born in their hearts. The spark of rebellion flared into a conspiracy. The leader of the renegades was an angel named Samyaza. He saw this forbidden attraction growing among his brothers and decided to use it for his own purposes. However, he understood the gravity of the coming transgression and feared that he alone would bear the punishment for this great sin. So he gathered his followers and spoke to them with cunning words. "I fear you will not agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty for a great sin." His words resonated. 200 watchers, seized by a single desire, decided to act together. They made a pact, binding it with mutual curses so that no one could back out of their decision. This was not just an act of disobedience. It was a conscious and collective betrayal of their duty and their Creator. They chose the summit of Mount Hermon, in the north of the Holy Land, as the place for their unholy pact. The name itself became symbolic, as it echoes the ancient word herem, meaning curse. It was there, on the border between heaven and earth, that they took their oath and descended to the daughters of men. This event became the point of no return. The Watchers, who were supposed to be a source of light and wisdom, became teachers of darkness for humanity. They abandoned their heavenly abodes and entered into unions with earthly women, violating the primary cosmic law, the law of separation between worlds, the spiritual and the material, the heavenly and the earthly, mixed in an unnatural union. This act became the root cause of all further corruption. It opened the gates to chaos and forever changed the course of human history, setting in motion a chain of events that would inevitably lead the world to total destruction. This forbidden union could not remain without consequences. From the depths of this mingling of two natures, beings were about to appear on Earth that should never have existed. That unnatural union, sealed on the summit of the cursed mountain, soon produced its horrific fruits. When heavenly seed mixed with earthly flesh, creatures began to be born who had no place in either world. Earthly women conceived and gave birth to offspring whose nature was twisted from the very beginning. Ancient texts call them the Nephilim, which can be translated as the fallen, or giants. These were not just tall people, they were the living embodiment of a broken cosmic law. The Book of Enoch describes their height in symbolic, colossal terms, portraying them more like moving mountains than living beings. Their mere presence distorted the landscape and inspired primal terror. But the true nightmare lay not in their gigantic size, but in their nature. They were born with a bottomless, insatiable void inside them, a hunger that could never be satisfied. At first, humanity, perhaps out of fear or a false reverence for their semi-divine origin, tried to feed these giants. All the labor of humans, all their harvests, all their herds and stores went to satisfying these insatiable children of heaven and earth. But human resources were finite, and the giants' appetite was limitless. Very soon the granaries were empty, the fields were ravaged, and the livestock was wiped out. All the achievements of civilization, everything people had created through their labor, was consumed and destroyed. When the food produced by humans ran out, the Nephilim, driven by their relentless need, turned their gaze to the animal world. They hunted indiscriminately, destroying the fauna of the earth. But even that was not enough. And then came the darkest hour in the planet's history. Finding no more food, the giants began to attack each other. And then, most horrifyingly, they turned against their smaller, fragile relatives, humans. The world plunged into an abyss of unimaginable horror. Man was no longer the master of his planet. He became food. All social order collapsed. There were no laws, no morality, no compassion. Only the rule of the strong and the cruelty of survival. The earth turned into a bloody arena. The Book of Enoch describes how the planet itself groaned from the injustice and bloodshed, and the cries of the oppressed and exterminated people rose to the heavens unanswered. It was a true hell on earth. A chaos born from the betrayal of those who were meant to be guardians of order. Progress was thrown back, settlements were destroyed, and hope was nearly extinguished. It seemed as if creation itself was on the brink of total annihilation under the weight of these monstrous beings. But the physical extermination of humanity was only one, most obvious part of the catastrophe. The fallen angels brought humanity other gifts that proved to be a far more lasting and destructive curse. However, the physical extermination carried out by the giants was only the crude, visible form of the destruction that befell the world. There was another, far more subtle and pervasive evil. The fallen angels didn't just enter into forbidden unions with humans. They brought with them knowledge that the human mind was not yet ready to accept. These were not gifts, but poison served in a golden chalice. They opened a true Pandora's box for humanity, unleashing forces that people could neither understand nor control. A process of internal decay began, which proved to be more terrifying than any physical violence. The main teacher of the forbidden arts was Azazel, one of the leaders of the fallen. It was he who showed people things that forever changed their society. He revealed to them the secrets of metalworking, but not for creation. Azazel extracted iron from the earth and taught men how to forge swords, knives, shields, and breastplates from it. Into a world where conflicts were resolved by primitive means, the art of systematic destruction arrived. Humanity was given weapons, and the blood that had previously been shed in random skirmishes now flowed in rivers, in organized wars. But his lessons were not limited to tools for taking life. He also showed people the other side of metals, the gleam of gold and silver, the radiance of precious stones. He taught them to create jewelry and bracelets. This gave rise to vanity, envy, and greed. People began to judge each other not by their inner qualities, but by their outer sparkle. Moreover, Azazel taught women the art of seduction, using cosmetics, coloring their eyelids, and wearing jewelry to attract attention. What might seem like innocent adornment became a catalyst for moral decay in that world. Natural beauty was replaced by artificiality, and the purity of relationships gave way to deception and lust. This was followed by widespread debauchery and the abandonment of all moral principles. People lost their way, caught up in the pursuit of pleasure and material wealth. But that wasn't all. Each of the fallen brought their share of poison knowledge. Samyaza, their chief leader, taught sorcery and incantations. Others revealed to people the secrets of astrology, not as the science of the movement of stars, but as a way to predict fate, thereby canceling free will and divine providence. People were taught to read omens in the constellations, in the movement of clouds, in the signs of the earth, sun, and moon. This bred superstition and turned people away from faith in a single creator, making them worship celestial bodies and seek answers not in their souls, but in the cold emptiness of space. Humanity received technology and knowledge, but lacked the wisdom to manage them. It was like giving a child a razor-sharp blade. Instead of rising, the human race began to rapidly degenerate. The knowledge that should have served development became instruments of self-destruction. The world was now poisoned on all levels. The earth groaned under the feet of giants, and the souls of men were corrupted by false teachings and forbidden practices. When the world was on the brink of complete annihilation, torn by violence from without and rotting from within, and the cries of desperate people finally reached the heavens, what was the divine response to this double betrayal of both angels and men? The cries of desperate souls, mixed with the groans of a tormented planet, could not go unheard forever. This chorus of pain and suffering broke through the chaos that enveloped the earth and reached the celestial realms. There, in the higher spheres, those who remained faithful to their duty could no longer stand by as indifferent witnesses. The four great archangels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, looked down from the heavens at the rivers of blood flooding the earth and the lawlessness that had become the norm. They saw how creation, intended as the pinnacle of harmony, had turned into an arena for monsters and a breeding ground for vice. Their sorrow and righteous anger turned into words, and they stood before the throne of the Almighty to become the voice of a world being destroyed. They presented the Creator with the full picture of the catastrophe, how the Watchers had abandoned their high heavens, defiled themselves with the daughters of men, and produced a hybrid offspring. They told of the forbidden knowledge that Azazel had revealed to humanity, of swords and armor, of empty ornaments and sorcerous charms that led to war and debauchery. They recounted how the earth had filled with violence, and the souls of men with darkness. This was not just a complaint. It was a formal indictment presented at the highest court of the universe. And the response was not long in coming. Divine intervention was decided upon, and it would be as decisive as the fall had been terrible. The verdict was passed, and each archangel was given a specific mission. Raphael was ordered to find Azazel, the chief seducer of humanity. His fate was dreadful, to be bound hand and foot and cast into the darkness of the desert, to a place called Dudael. There, in complete darkness, he was to be covered with jagged and sharp rocks, where he would remain until the day of the great judgment, when he would be thrown into the eternal fire. Gabriel was given a different task, to descend into the world and turn the children of the intermingling, the giants, against one another. He was to incite in them a thirst for internecine war, so that they would exterminate themselves in a bloody battle. Their own insatiable thirst for violence would become the instrument of their destruction, and their fathers, the fallen angels, would be forced to watch helplessly as their monstrous offspring perished. And Michael, the leader of the heavenly host, was tasked with announcing the sentence to Samyaza and all his followers. They faced immediate imprisonment. They were to be bound and confined in a prison beneath the hills of the earth for 70 generations, until the day when the judgment of the whole world would take place. Their punishment was not only physical confinement, but also the eternal torment of knowing what they had done, as they would be forced to watch the consequences of their betrayal for centuries. But even after the destruction of the giants and the imprisonment of their fathers, the earth remained defiled. Evil had put down roots too deep. Knowledge had been shared, souls had been poisoned, and the very fabric of creation had been damaged. Simply removing the culprits could no longer heal the planet. A complete reset, a radical cleansing was required. And so, the most terrible and at the same time most merciful decision was made: to send the great flood upon the earth. This was not an act of anger, but an act of surgical intervention, designed to wash away all the filth, all the corruption, and all traces of the unnatural union. The waters were to destroy everything that breathed on the earth, to give the world a chance to be reborn from purity. However, even in this total cleansing, there was a ray of hope. The divine plan did not call for complete annihilation. Amidst the universal corruption, one man was found whose soul remained pure: the righteous Noah, the great-grandson of Enoch himself. It was to him that the archangel Uriel was sent with news of the coming cataclysm. Noah received not just a warning, but detailed instructions on how to save himself, his family, and the seed of all life on the planet. He was commanded to build an ark and gather into it a pair of every kind of creature, so that after the great cleansing, life on earth could begin anew. But the story of the fall and the purification was only the first chapter in the great revelations granted to Enoch. He was shown not only the secrets of the past, but also the mysteries of the future and the very structure of the cosmos. The great cleansing by the waters of the flood was an act that concluded one dark chapter in Earth's history. But the revelations given to Enoch were not limited to a chronicle of the past fall. His unique destiny, to be taken to heaven alive, was not just a rescue from the coming catastrophe. It was an invitation to a journey, during which he would become not just a witness, but an explorer of the very fabric of creation. The heavenly gates opened before him, and under the guidance of the archangel Uriel, the keeper of the celestial lights, Enoch began his travels through spheres inaccessible to mortal sight. He ceased to be merely a man of flesh and blood. He became a traveler between worlds, a chronicler of the cosmos. The first thing revealed to him was the great celestial order. This knowledge formed the basis of the so-called astronomical book, a part of his manuscript dedicated to the mechanics of the universe. Enoch was shown not a chaotic dance of planets, but a flawlessly tuned cosmic mechanism. He saw how the sun and moon move through their celestial gates, how their phases change, and how the seasons obey an immutable law. The secret of a perfect calendar was revealed to him, a solar year consisting of exactly 364 days. This year was divided into 4 absolutely equal seasons, each with 91 days. In turn, each season consisted of 3 months of 30 days each, with 1 extra day at the end of the 3rd month. Thus, the year consisted of exactly 52 weeks, and each new year and each season always began on the same day, the 4th Wednesday, the day on which, according to the book of Genesis, the celestial lights were created. This calendar was the embodiment of divine harmony and order, the complete opposite of the chaos that had reigned on earth due to the interference of the fallen. But Enoch's journeys were not limited to studying the physical laws of the cosmos. He was granted visions that pierced the veil of time. In the part known as the Book of Parables, the entire future history of the world unfolded before his spiritual eyes, presented in allegories and prophecies. He saw the fates of nations, the rise and fall of empires, but most importantly, he foresaw the final act of the great drama that began with the fall of the Watchers. He was shown that a day of last judgment would come, when all that is secret will be made known, and all unrighteous deeds will be judged. It is in these visions that Enoch describes a mysterious and majestic figure destined to carry out this judgment. He calls him the Son of Man. This description is striking in its detail and theological depth, as it was written hundreds of years before the events of the New Testament. Enoch writes that this Son of Man existed even before the creation of the sun and stars, that his name was spoken before the Lord of Spirits, before the beginning of time. He describes him as the Chosen One and the Righteous One, whose dwelling is beside the Most High. According to the prophecy, it is this Son of Man who, at the end of time, will sit on a dazzling throne of glory and will judge not only the sinful kings and the powerful of this world, but also the very fallen angels who were imprisoned in darkness. He will become a light to the nations and a hope for those who suffer in heart. His coming will mark the end of the age of evil and the beginning of an eternal kingdom of peace and righteousness. This prophecy, so closely echoing later messianic expectations, makes the Book of Enoch not just a historical artifact, but a text containing potentially explosive information. And now, knowing all this, the stories of fallen angels, of giants born from a forbidden union, of the transfer of destructive technologies, and of amazing prophecies that foresaw key events in sacred history, we can return to the main question. Now that this grand and unsettling panorama has unfolded before us, we can piece together all the clues. We have a story of cosmic betrayal, of monstrous giants destroying all life, of forbidden technologies given to humanity, of immortals' journeys through the celestial realms, and of prophecies hundreds of years ahead of their time. Knowing all this, we inevitably return to the central question. Why was this text once revered deemed dangerous, struck from the canon, and condemned to oblivion? The answers lie on several levels, and each one is shocking in its own way. The first and most obvious reason lies in theology. The Book of Enoch offers a far too detailed and, most importantly, an extremely inconvenient explanation for the origin of evil in the world. The official, canonical version, focused on the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, presents a simple and understandable drama of human disobedience. In it, the blame for the fall lies entirely with humanity, which yielded to temptation and violated a divine command. This concept became the foundation for the doctrine of original sin, upon which many dogmas are built. The Book of Enoch, however, shatters this neat structure. It paints a much more complex and multi-layered tragedy, where the initial impulse for evil comes not from humanity, but from the heavens. It asserts that humanity was not so much tempted as systematically corrupted and taught evil by higher beings who betrayed their duty. This drastically shifts the focus of blame. If humans learn to wage war, deceive, and practice sorcery from fallen angels, then what is the true measure of their own responsibility? This version makes humanity more a victim of cosmic subversion than the sole perpetrator of its own downfall. For a developing religious doctrine, such ambiguity was unacceptable. It was far easier to manage a flock with a clear story of sin and redemption than to explain the complex twists of a celestial war whose consequences fell upon the earth. The second reason is canonical and political. As we have seen, the Book of Enoch contains incredibly powerful and detailed prophecies, particularly about the figure of the Son of Man. These texts, written long before the events of the Gospels, could have created serious competition for the canonical scriptures. When the Church Fathers were forming a single, unshakable collection of sacred texts, the Bible, they needed the New Testament to be absolutely unique and authoritative. The existence of an older source that described the coming Messiah and the Last Judgment in such detail undermined this uniqueness. The Book of Enoch could be perceived as an alternative, independent channel of divine revelation, which would create confusion in the minds of the faithful. To build a solid structure of faith, only carefully selected stones could be used for its foundation. Anything that could cause doubt or double interpretations was ruthlessly cut away. The Book of Enoch, with its own powerful cosmology and prophetic authority, was too large and independent a piece on this board. It was easier to declare it apocryphal and push it into the shadows than to try to integrate it into the overall system, risking the integrity of the whole. But what if these theological and canonical reasons are just the surface layer, a convenient explanation hiding a deeper and more disturbing truth? The book speaks directly and openly about strange beings with advanced knowledge who visited our Earth. The descriptions of their actions are strikingly tangible. They teach not abstract philosophy, but concrete skills, metallurgy, weapon making, astronomy. Their offspring, the giants, are also quite material beings, destroying everything in their path. Enoch himself doesn't just have spiritual visions. He undertakes journeys, ascending and descending. All of this fits poorly within the framework of simple allegory. Perhaps the real reason for the fear of this book is not that it contradicts dogmas, but that it describes, all too frankly, events that were intentionally distorted or forgotten. What if its content is inconvenient for some, not because of its theology, but because of its facts? This brings us to the third, most daring and frightening hypothesis. What if we have been reading this text all wrong? What if behind the words angels and heavens lies something entirely different, something a modern person would call by another name? And so we stand at the threshold of the final, most daring, and most provocative hypothesis. We have set aside theological disputes and canonical prohibitions, and we are now ready to ask the question that changes absolutely everything. What if we have been reading this ancient text with the wrong dictionary all along? What if the terms angels and heavens are just a desperate attempt by ancient people to describe phenomena for which no words existed in their language? Let's, for a moment, strip the mystical veil from this story and look at it through the lens of modern knowledge. What if the Watchers who descended from the heavens were not spiritual entities, but representatives of a highly advanced, perhaps extraterrestrial civilization? Imagine this scene. Not angelic wings, but the gleam of a landing craft. Not divine light, but the beams of searchlights. Their arrival on the secluded summit of Mount Hermon was not a mystical act, but the choice of a strategically convenient location to establish a base or observation camp. Their beauty and power, which captured the imagination of the people, were not a supernatural aura, but the natural reaction of a primitive culture to beings possessing technology that seemed like magic. In this light, the forbidden knowledge they imparted ceases to be sinful sorcery and becomes an act of irresponsible technology transfer. Remember Arthur C. Clarke, who said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Azazel, teaching people metalworking and weapon creation, is not a demon, but an engineer or an armorer sharing deadly blueprints. The knowledge of cosmetics and precious stones represents the basics of chemistry and geology. Teaching astrology, the knowledge of clouds, and the movement of celestial bodies, is the transfer of basic principles of astronomy, meteorology, and navigation. The problem wasn't the knowledge itself, but that human society, in the early stages of its moral development, was completely unprepared for such a technological leap. It received power without wisdom, which led to war, vanity, and self-destruction. And what about the giants, the Nephilim, born from this union? Within this hypothesis, they appear as the result of a rogue genetic experiment. The union between the visitors and humans may not have been just physical contact, but a deliberate intervention in the human genome. The Nephilim were hybrids, perhaps created as a workforce or soldiers, but the experiment went wrong. Their gigantic size, insatiable hunger, and aggression are signs of genetic instability, the side effects of a failed crossbreeding. And finally, Enoch himself. How did he ascend to the heavens and journey through the celestial spheres? Perhaps his ascension was not a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment, but a physical act. He could have been chosen by these observers as a contact, a man intelligent and righteous enough to be trusted. His journeys under Uriel's guidance were not mystical visions, but tours aboard their craft. They didn't just reveal the secrets of the cosmos to him, they showed them to him on screens or through viewports. The detailed description of the solar calendar was not a divine revelation, but data obtained from their navigational instruments. In that case, the Great Flood also appears in a completely different light. It could have been either a natural cataclysm that the advanced civilization was able to predict with its technology and warned their chosen contact, Noah, about. Or, and this is an even more frightening thought, it was a deliberate sanitization operation of the planet. Realizing that their experiments with the hybrids had led to disaster and threatened the entire biosphere, the Watchers, or their superiors, might have decided to reset everything, using climate weaponry to wash away the evidence of their failure, after first preserving the genetic material in an ark. If you look at the Book of Enoch from this angle, it ceases to be just an apocryphal text. It becomes something like a report on a first contact that went tragically wrong. Perhaps that is why it was so carefully hidden. This truth is far more explosive than any theological dispute. It strips humanity of its unique place at the center of a divine plan, and turns our history into a side effect of someone else's intervention. It suggests that our ancient gods and demons may have been beings of flesh and blood, whose technology we mistook for divine power. No one is seeking answers to these questions today. At least not openly. All we can do is read between the lines and wait for the day when the truth is revealed to us.